Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Ali Ingersoll. 4 law enforcement members are dead and 4 others injured after a shooting outside of Charlotte took place Monday. In the wake of the shooting, WRAL sent team members across the state to figure out what happened. Eric Miller is one of those reporters, and he joins us now to talk about that. Hey, Eric, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with what we know. How did this happen?
So this started with an attempt to serve a felony warrant on a man named Terry Hughes Jr. He's a 39-year-old, according to neighbors we talked with in the area. He'd been living at this house in this Charlotte neighborhood for about a month. A joint task force put together by the U.S. Marshals Service showed up yesterday around 1:30 in the afternoon. They make their way up to the door trying to serve this warrant for possession of a firearm by a felon, and before they can even get up there, the shots start ringing out. We learned at a press conference on Tuesday morning that it seems that Hughes was posted up in an upstairs window, firing down on these officers. We had 8 officers in total who were injured. 4 died of gunshot wounds. 3 others are currently recovering, and 1 officer actually ended up breaking his ankle.
What do we know about the 4 officers who lost their lives?
So we're still piecing a lot of that together. They were from a number of different agencies. One of them was a Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officer, Officer Joshua Iyer. He was a 6-year veteran of this department, had just been named Officer of the Month a few months back. We're told that he fought for his life for several hours after being shot before eventually succumbing to his injuries late last night. He was a father, leaves behind a young child here, a wife as well. An enormous outpouring of support for this family, so much emotion from local leaders as well as national leaders on all of this. There were 2 members of this task force as well who were part of the North Carolina Department of Adult Corrections, Samuel Pelosi and Alden Elliott. They were shot and killed as well. Both were 14-year veterans of that department. There was also a U.S. Marshal shot and killed as well. That was Thomas Weeks. So we're still working to learn more on all of these men, on the contributions they made. But again, the outpouring that is come out in the wake of their deaths has been unbelievable. Everyone from Governor Roy Cooper here in North Carolina to President Biden, who put out a statement late Monday night calling all of these men heroes.
Yeah, what I thought was devastating is to hear about their family members. Several of those men had young children, which I'm sure is really difficult for their family members as well as the community. Shifting gears quickly, what do we know about Terry Clark Hughes Jr., the suspect?
Well, we know that he had a very long record here. And as I said, he had only been at this address, according to neighbors, for about a month when the officers came to serve this warrant. Again, that warrant was for possession of a firearm by a felon. But that's one of those things that we've been working to learn more about his past, his record, and then we're hoping to bring you those answers soon.
So there was a press conference Tuesday. Tell me what we learned there and who all was present at that press conference.
So that press conference was providing us an update once again from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. We learned the names of the other officers injured here. They were Officer Chris Tolley, Officer Mike Giglio, Officer Jack Blowers, and Officer Joshua Campbell. That last officer was the one who actually broke his foot here. We also found out that it was U.S. Marshal Thomas Weeks who was killed here as well. Police were able to provide us some new details, a little bit more on what happened here. The fact that Hughes was posted up in this second-story window. But again, so many unanswered questions and so much emotion coming out of this press conference as well, as has been the case every time leaders have been asked to speak on this really difficult topic.
Is that who's leading this investigation, Charlotte-Mecklenburg?
Charlotte-Mecklenburg, yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll have more after this break. Thanks. Welcome back. So, Eric, you've been in Charlotte now for several hours, and you arrived there hours after the shooting took place. Tell me exactly what it feels like in that community right now.
So we were set up out there as close as we could get to this scene, essentially in the middle of the night. We got out there about 3:30, 4 o'clock this morning, and this was a sprawling scene. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg police had this area closed down for blocks in every direction. You couldn't go in, couldn't come out. Officers were coming and going all the time. They had lights set up overnight. This entire house lit up as investigators did their work. Talking to neighbors out there, it's been a tremendously traumatic 24 hours, simply because this wasn't something that impacted just the home that Hughes was holed up in. This impacted this entire neighborhood. We interviewed people who had officers running through their front yards, jumping over their fences, coming through their living rooms, their kitchens, their bedrooms. There were neighbors who had snipers setting up in their homes, pointing guns at the house Hughes was holed up in. There was one man we talked to who had an injured officer dragged through his living room. Another man we interviewed had bullets strike the side of his house in the exchange of gunfire between police and Hughes. So, I mean, it's unbelievably scary moments for folks in this community that they're still working to piece together. And it's been an incredibly busy day out there around this house as well. The scene is striking. It looks like a tornado came past and tore part of this house apart. That's both because of the number of bullet holes that are in the siding, in the shutters, in the windows, and also because neighbors tell us the SWAT team who was there when this standoff was happening, when these shots were being fired, they actually used a vehicle to tear open the front of the house. And once we finally got a look at it, you could see chunks of the house completely missing, personal items literally spilling out where the walls used to be. It's hard to look at.
Wow, that seems very chaotic and, as you mentioned, very traumatizing for people who are in that community. How far exactly is this area from downtown Charlotte?
It's a couple of miles away from downtown Charlotte. This is on the eastern side of town. It's in a neighborhood where folks tell us it's not unusual, quite frankly, to hear gunfire. They say that's just what comes with living in that neck of the woods. But something like this, it's not something anybody has ever experienced before or even thought they would experience.
So when this all started happening on Monday, they kind of knew at that moment that this was different. Is that what you're saying?
In some cases, it took them a minute because they've heard the first couple of shots. We talked to one gentleman who said, he heard the first couple of shots and thought, okay, that's potentially normal, concerning, but normal. And then when it kept going, when it wasn't just a couple of shots, it turned into a couple of hundred shots. That's when he knew something different, something really tragic and terrible was going on.
Eric, once again now, can you just kind of lay out this timeline? How long was all of this really going on in the community? When did it start? When did it really wrap up?
So it played out over the course of hours. It started, of course, right around 1:30 Monday afternoon. That's when this joint task force tried to serve this felony warrant to Hughes. Neighbors then tell us the shooting went on for several hours. One neighbor who lived almost right next door said he was still hearing gunshots more than 2 hours after all of this first started. And of course, the investigation, that dragged on from 1:30 all the way until 8:30 the next morning. That's when we finally saw investigators clear this scene. So it was a very large police presence out there, and there for a very long time.
And we do keep talking about that investigation, about that press conference that happened on Tuesday, and how there are so many elements of this still unanswered. So what are some of the questions that we still have that we're hoping to get answers for over the next couple days?
Well, the big question at this point, and I think it's a question that investigators are going to be digging into, is what exactly happened here? How exactly did this go so wrong? Keep in mind, we're talking about 7 officers shot here, 4 of them fatally. That's not a number that you ever hear about. Forget Charlotte, forget North Carolina. You don't hear about that in America terribly often. This is an incredibly rare occurrence. So this is something that really these investigators are going to be digging into is how exactly did this happen? Did you have this man able to kill and injure so many different officers? That's one of those key questions that we're digging into here. We're also working to learn more about the officers who were shot, who were injured, more about the lives they led and the people they leave behind. Again, one of the things that we heard from neighbors when we were out there was how grateful they were for these officers who put themselves in harm's way. And that's something I think folks want to hear a lot more about.
All right, Eric. Well, I know it's been a long couple of days for you. Thank you so much for your coverage. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more podcasts from WRAL News at WRAL.com. Search podcast. From sports to true crime, there are plenty of shows to keep you informed and entertained. Thanks for listening.